Yudalid. Let's see what the Rab says. The blurb says drush shlishi cotton. This is a small drush. He says yivur bo tam the heter shabbatim shall rosh shehem dalid. I guess he means the difference between the head silver tefillin, which are four, the tefillin shall yad shehem echad belvad, which are only one. The Rab writes nivoyer bo inin tefillin shall rosh. Lama yesh lachem arba batim v'shal yad bayis echad belvad. V'makom acher bi'arda betam acher. There's another place we had another reason for this. V'chadivayir ata Rabbi Yosef bepratos. B'meh shenaora Rabbi Sha'ayda acheres. It arouses another question. He ne gam arba batim. Even if we talk about the four batim, the tefillin shall rosh. Hey menatzach hod yisod de'ima. They come from the na'yavima. So he says the arba batim. Being came tzarek elushi yoshnei batim levad. There shouldn't be four. There should be only two. Echad menatzach and hod trepal gegufa. One that we said that netzach and hod are two halves of they're actually one element. So why should they be in two different places? Ve'echad min yisod, and then one for the yisod. That makes two. V'sham tiratzno. So the answer that we gave of the shal yisod nivka, because the yisod breaks open. The nechlach l'shnei batim, and it gets divided into two. But says oral l'chutz besod or makiv. So since it breaks open, and it makes itself into two, it becomes an or makiv. But now looking over the netzach and hod, I'm not sure that I really understood that answer. So that, about inyan netzach and hod, the daim tzarech l'taret. So we still have to answer like this: that the two of them should only be in one. But the Indian is like this: when we talk about the nukva. So the ein hanetzach and hod the zera be'atzvim na'azim bate b'malchus. The netzach and hod the zera anpin. They do not make batim themselves. Rak harasam, only a secondary light. There's a glow that comes from them. Rak harasam bilvad boletet v'yotza the chutz alecho. So that's the only part that goes out to her. Now one of the things here is that what they do here, he split off the nukva, and he says this makes it sound like the tefillin are actually feeding her. He says rak rasa bilvad boletis, that goes out of the skull of their anpin, v'yotzes l'chutz salacha to the nook. So therefore they're only considered to be one element because it's not the etzim, it's the ha'ara. Because they go down the right and the left line respectively. So they're over there, they're considered to be two. That's a little bit of a difficulty there in trying to get it all together. Let's see what the Tibba Gavanos says on this. Let me see if we go. Okay. So he says, Nakdim Akadama Katana the Havanas Divri Harab. Kasa Besectus Menachos, he said of the Tanu Rabbanim, the Totafos, the Tatofos, the Totafos. Now, I didn't look this up. So he says the Tatos, so these are the head tefillin, and he said this word three times. It has, as I can see, two different spellings. Hare Khan Dalit. So he says if you count them up, you have four. And I don't know how we got that. Apparently that's the wording of the Gemara. Mekan Shekosev Dalit Parshas Badalit Batim. Divi Rabbi Shmuel. Now I don't really know Pshat over there. Rabbi Akiva Omer Einat Sarach, he says that because Tot in Kaspi Shtaim Opas Bafriki Shtaim. So that gives you four. So he says that, so you can divide up the word and you see the origin of the concept of four in the word itself, totafos. Tana Rabbanim Yachol Yichtavam al dalad oros. So maybe I would think that what it is that you take four different klafim and you write it on four different ones. V'yanechem b'dalad batim, and you place them into four. Okay, and you place them into four batim b'dalad oros in four different skins or four different klafim. So let's say dalad oros v'yanechem b'dalad batim b'dalad oros. Take the four oros, you put in the four boxes. Dalad chatikos klaf. It's four different pieces of klaf. B'dalad batim shall dalad chatikos, put them, if the four klafim, in the four different boxes. Chatikos klaf. Tamalova, but the zicharon beinenachon, it should be for remembrance before your eyes. Zichron echad the martiloch, I said one remembrance. V'lecha bebeis or gimel zichronos. Al ketzad koisvim al dalid oros. So if it's supposed to be one, then how are you make it into four? Menichem bedalid balsim ba'or echad. So what you do is you menichem bedalid batim. So you put it somehow in the four with one cloth. Shemap shitim ego cotton. So he says that what you do is you skin a calf, small calf, and you take a little shtickle hide, and you put it in some kind of a mold. It has like four fingers to it. And you put it in there when it's still fresh, and you let it dry out in this mold of a notlim as the defus. Then you take the defus, and from the mold itself, you make houses. I'm not sure that I really understood that exactly. He says you take one cloth, you spread it apparently over four different batim, or if they call it dalit, it's bows. Of the yavish of the defus, you let it dry there. The notim as a defus, and then you take the whole defus. Then you make the different compartments out of it. Being or now let's say if you're writing them with just one skin, and you take one. I'm not sure what the difference is. If you cause them just on one skin, which I thought was what he said, you take one velokin chatikas or one cut of one and then he said or echad. If you write them just on one hide, echad v'chanichem b'dal batim yatz, and then you put them in four different batim, then you're yatz. Not sure what that meant. Tana Rabbanan Ketzad Kozvan. So how do you write them? Tefillin shel yad kozvim al or echad. So that obviously you write it on one skin. Kol arba parshas, all of them. Being kozvach arba oros. Now, if you write it on four different hides, badalad igaros. I guess that means strips of paper. V'chanichem b'bayis echad yatz, and you put the four of them in one. Then that's yatsa adkan. That's a difference or a halachos in the writing of the tefillin. So this sounds like, again, up at the top it said in kosvam arba oros. You took four of them, but baladigaros, he says, Rashi says that. But hanicha b'bayis achad, you take four and you put it in one box. That's, you could be yatsa with that adkan. Because of the Shulchan Aruch or Chaim, he said the Zel Shana, the Parsha shall rosh. Yichtavu kol echad beklaf levado. So this is apparently a difference of opinion. He says that you put it really all each one of them in a different cloth. Of a shal yad kosvim kulam beklaf echad ad kan v'sham kosev od v'zel l'shona. Then he goes on and he says this. He says Ya'asa arba or echad, make four different compartments out of one skin. L'shal rosh, for that's for the head. So he said again, arba batim ma'or echad. So you make it all out of one. It sounds like the first explanation with the defus. Ubais echad the shal yad, and then you have one for the hand. So his adkan. Now the Arab is going to really get into it in a different way. In the sod. Mifnei mat film shall rosh sark shiyir ma'asim ma'arba batim. Why this has to be 4 batim? Ba'ofen should call parsha munacha b'bayis nifra. In other words, the 4 different compartments, excuse me, the 4 parshas will be put into different batim. Ve'edach tefillin sheyad na'asim b'bayis echad b'vad. V'call arba parshas kos v'al klav echad. So that's easy to hear that. So exactly how you get to the 4, that's the question over there, I guess. Okay, almost again. Okay, coming back up again. We're on number bet. Baram Evir Bioser Beer as a time should cost the El Perik base. So what he wrote up above, he said what Perik base was what we went through before without the Pirush. He said V'charam Bioser Beer as a time should cost the El Perik base. Again, he said Beer Inyanu. So now let's try to understand this. So there was questions about, in the introduction. This is the question. The Hare Arba Babatim to Tefillin shall rosh. So let's take 4, right? Those 4. Romazim al Nai shall Ima. So what is it actually? The Nai of Ima comes into Zer Anpin, and it's Boletis Bechutz, right? Sheshom Nimsoim Amochim Shehem Parshas, because that's where you find the Mochim which are the Parshas. The Nimsa the Fizeh, so in other words, that's the Panemius, the Parshas themselves are really what everything's written on. And so therefore, Nimsa the Fizeh, Sharabatim Haim Hanai the Ima. So that's really an extension of the Nai of Ima. Parshios Haim Hamochim Shabbasochim. So then you have the Batim represent the Nai, so it's a physical Nai, and inside of them, Haim Hamochim Shabbasochim. If you say that they're coming from the Nai of Ima, so this gets the whole question of what's happening in the Nai of Ima. Why would you think that 2 is good enough? Because they're really only one. So without them being together in oneness, then they're really only halves. So you could see that. Who connected the Yisod the Ima. So the second one corresponds to the Yisod of Ima. So that you could see that it's good enough there to have 2 batim. So you have one for the Netzachod, one for the Yisod. So why do you need 4? So let's see, how do you get 2 into 4? So Yisod the Ima Nivka. So he says the first thing you need to know is that the Yisod of Ima breaks open the Nechlach l'Shnayim. That gets about the 2 the Fichach Yisod Ramos b'Shnei Batim. Now I think there's more to that that I don't understand 100% because he says it splits. I'm not sure. I understand it splits, but I don't know. Not sure that I had the concept that it splits into 2 separate elements. I guess maybe he does. One is up above the split and one below the split. Maybe that's it. I don't know. So he says of a Vikiyas Yisod the Ima the Shnei Batim. So let's talk about it. He says that you divide it into 2. That's when the lights go out from Ima. So in other words, they split open and everything comes out. The Ima ben Asim b'chutz the oros mekifim, and now since it's outside of Ima, it becomes a maki. So now let's see. B'chat tefillin. So what does it have to do with the tefillin? B'chat tefillin meramazim al oros amochin desar shebokim b'chutz. So that's what the tefillin are. That is part of Ima, of the Yisod of Ima, that splits, and it the Zashibokim Mechutz, it goes outwards, and the Nai the Ima Shabbatok Zeranpin, and so it goes outside of the Nai of Ima. In other words, it's not contained anymore. So therefore, it's a separate element, I guess he's saying. Yotzev and Asa Bechutz Oros Makifim. Now they're Makifim. Shehem Hemat Tefillin, and that in fact is the Tefillin. Now, here we have, my question is that where does it break open? It breaks open at the chest, right? At the chest, because that's where the Taurus Yisod of Ima is there, and it's split. I don't know. He says it splits, so maybe it doesn't mean at the chest. Maybe that's where the opening is, and it goes out. But apparently along the part which we call what the situm, or the what's that? Is that the right word? The closed up part splits. And so now you see a part of it that got out and a part of it that's still in. I guess is what he meant. But Kevin Shachar Yisod Nechloch L'Shnayim, V'chein Memuach Hadas Na'asiv Shtei Bechinos Shehem Chasad Geburos. So since it's split now, I'm not sure how. Once again, how this makes sense. V'chein Shachar Yisod Nechloch L'Shnayim. So you said it too. Part of the light went out. So therefore, in Das itself, because the Yisod goes into the Das, this causes two different aspects. One is called Chassan Das and Gevuras Das. Famous Lavshin b'shnei batim. V'amnam nizbar b'fnecha b'mat tzaruk shnei batim el Yisod. So what do you need this for? Akadayim loch nisyashiv. So now it's really not settled. B'fnei ma yesh tzaruk b'shnei batim. And that's if the whole de'ima shebechem mislavshin b'chachva b'bein the dizaz. So now I personally can see why you would do it. He said, "Ma yesh sorach. What do you need this for? That it should split into two. Shebechem islav shem chachma b'bina dezah. V'chalucha b'netzach anho b'hem trei pal gegufa. That's our question. B'dai lechem sheyisha shenecha b'paisachol. V'chayisha dezachu she'ana oisim b'netzach anho. So the idea here is shnei batim b'tefillin shal rosh hu mishum." Okay. So he says, "Kasher niknasim amochin benuk dezah." As the mochin go into the nuk dezah, oz ein anai dezach be'atzma na'asa atzma ma'atzma etzem ma'atzmois ma'atzmoisav he yos mochin the nuk kasher niknasim benuk dezah. So now we're going over. We're focusing on the nukva. So he says that the etzim of the light doesn't go, only ha'ara goes. That's what he said before. Elo rak ha'ara zanai dezah b'ki ha'yotza the la'ach dezah goes from his backside, sham ein me'irim benuk, and then from that place they shine to the nuk. Mahai timer ein srichan dezah the asos the atzman na'yodoshim. So think parenthetically, because the etzim is not going, it's just the ha'ara from it. So therefore, zah does not have to generate a new nai. Chadashin kamo ima. So he said, "B'kemin min hanetzach hanhod dezecha b'yotzin the nuk rak ha'aros halavusha b'vad v'chein shnei ha'aros halavucha the netzach hanhod dezecha the niknasa b'nuk nechshavim rak the bayis echad." So therefore, they're considered only as one because it's not the etzim; it's only the ha'ara. But when he gets zah, gets the na'im because what happens there is there in ima herself. There you have the etzim. Became shehem anetza behein ha'od. The ima shnechem atzman miknasa b'zah. So the two of them come into the zav. Actually, they're split there. One goes right, one goes left. Behein osem b'tefillin shal zav shnei batim the natzach v'hod. So therefore, since they're split, I guess you make two for them. Behein osem shnei batim no safos v'chasan v'gevuras the das v'kamosha kosav v'rav. And maybe we'll get into it more. I think that's it right there. Call to.